Yeah, move on to another interesting one that goes kind of along this, because obviously they sold at the peak and stuff came down, and there's a lot of like specifically within House of Discs, but also you have Prodigy and Lone Star over the last year that have some red flags going on in regards to the disc golf market as a whole. And so it's kind of refreshing to listen to Jeff Spring talk to a non-disc golfer and answer some of the questions. First thing he said is this podcast came out, I believe, I saw it on LinkedIn like yesterday or 2 days ago. No, that's not true because I listened to it Saturday morning. So I must have saw it on Friday on LinkedIn. So I don't know if that's when the podcast came out, but that's when I saw the podcast person post with Jeff Spring share it. So I'm assuming it came out like last week, meaning it was filmed pretty recently. You can also hear when he's talking about like the Q series finales in a few weeks. So it's definitely filmed like this time of year. And he confirms the 50,000 subscriber number on DGN, meaning there hasn't been a like mass exodus of DGN over the course of this year, which I was wondering if there would have been, just, you know, as money gets tighter,
it's mostly
as you
prices.
look at your subscriptions and you're like, oh, I got Netflix, I got Hulu, and I'm paying the same for DGN. I didn't know if that's going to be one of the ones that a lot of people left. 50,000 subscribers on DGN, that's still a very strong number.
I think retention does make sense for DGN because I don't know that it's really, especially where their price point is now, it's not really a casual subscribe. It's not a $2, $3, $5 even, where you just like, it is enough of a price that you're committing to it. And like if you're somebody who wants to pay that to watch disc golf, things have to get pretty tight for you to then take that out of your butt. It's not something you would just like probably fall off of. So I do feel like for them, like their product has been the same. They're delivering the same amount of disc golf, and I think they're doing fine with it. So like I don't expect there to be a massive drop off on their subscribers.
Well, people who are kind of into disc golf wouldn't sign
exactly.
up for
They
it
would
to
just watch it
begin
on
with.
Showmatch.
Yeah.
That's what I feel like. I feel like once you get a DGN customer, you've got probably a pretty good compared to other subscription services retention on that customer.
Yeah.
Now the next one he said, the more I was thinking about this over this weekend, I was like, surely I misheard. But what I heard was that DGN or Disc Golf Pro Tour has 60 employees and 40 contractors. I'm assuming I surely misheard that, and it was 16 employees and 40 contractors.
Well, I mean, that's a pretty big. We got to figure it out.
But the problem was I was listening to it on a run, so I don't know in that whole podcast at what point he said that. Because I just listened to it on a run and then wrote my notes down after the run.
Title of this podcast.
So
DGPT has 60.
I'm going to lean towards
60.
16.
Yeah, they definitely.
I'm thinking he said 16 employees, 40 contractors, because that makes sense to me. 16 employees.
Yeah, I think the good news is we can pretty easily write off 60 because
when I wrote
way.
it and I looked back at it, I was like, they got 100 total people they're paying out there. Like, surely that's not true. But if it is true, at least there's an easy way for them to cut prices.
Yeah,
you don't need 60 employees to do what's going on.
Because like, I mean,
16 makes sense.
How many do they even have listed in their directory?
That's the other thing is I was like, I've talked to a lot of Pro Tour employees. There's no shot I've only talked to like 10% of them.
Yeah, and also, I say, if you go to a Pro Tour event, if they had 60 employees and 40 contractors, they'd almost outnumber the gallery.
how I was interpreting the contractors is there's a cameraman that works in California,
right,
and we have to hire a different one to work in
That's
Vermont.
probably just their list.
You know what I'm saying? It's like they have 40 contractors, which that makes sense to me. It's like you're using, maybe there's 8 to 10 at an event. Yeah. And you're rotating through like 5 different regions, and that's how you get to 40. I don't think they're paying 40 at once, because if they were, they'd probably be employees. So 16 employees makes a lot more sense to me, but I can't confirm that number because I heard 60.
Yeah.
So there's got to be something there. The exciting thing that came out of this was he said that they're working towards sports betting next year.
What does that mean?
He said from how he was talking and the language he was using is they're hoping to be listed in certain states next year.
Wow. Listed. Interesting.
So they're definitely working. I don't know which sports book they're working with to do that, but time will tell.
Dude, that's going to be the Wild West.
And this makes more sense to me. He did say that like that was a big move for them with AWS, which is, remember that whole big announcement they made last year? We were like, so you switched from one backend server to another backend server. Why the frick does the user care?
Yeah.
And they were doing all these extra. Apparently, AWS was big in their like stat keeping and like solidifying or legitimizing their statistics for sports books.
Yeah.
So that seemed like that was a bigger move.
That the sports betting thing is super interesting because for starters, like it or not, I mean, this is where the sports industry is headed recently. And because there is, I mean, I forget the total figure, but it's, I believe, hundreds of billions of dollars industry, the sports betting industry is. So however they're able to monetize this, and that's where I'd be most curious, because if you have your own, there are so many different laws and regulations involving sports betting. I don't know how a sport monetizes, but I know they all make a ton of money off of it. And so, you know, if they were able to really utilize it, I mean, there's no telling what that could do for the Pro Tour as far as finances. The question is, you know, where are they going to get it listed? How are they going to go about that? And who's going to make the lines? You know, is it going to be our in-house people with these books? You know, because they, you know, that's what they do. You know, in Vegas, these sports books, they have line makers. Are they just going to be, you know, they're experts? Or are they just going to be assigned to disc golf? And we'll see how that goes. You know, the last time disc golf kind of had its run-in with sports betting, people kind of took it for all it was worth. The lines were not expertly made. So,
but it seemed like last time that was Prize Picks, and it seems like last time that they were kind of independently doing it.
Yeah.
Whereas now the Pro Tour has been building statistic data that they can feed someone. And because last time there were some criminal lines, whether it be like I'm not touching that 10-foot pole, or it's like that's the easiest line.
Here's the kicker, and this is actually what makes it different. Is Prize Picks' entire model was overs and unders.
Yeah,
that was way harder to do. I mean, if you and I took this year and the way we were setting it was just based on
pick the winner,
it would have been very easy. We knew, I mean, there would have been a couple huge hits, the Presnell, right? Like things like that. But most of the year would have been
Gannon
would have been
minus
like 1,000, and he would have won, and it would have been no big deal. So like I do think if you do it that way, it won't be that hard to set lines.
No, I totally agree.
Because the product is pretty consistent. The Kristen Tatars of the world, the Missy Gannons, they're going to win most of the events.
Yeah. But the other thing he was talking about why he thinks it'll be big, and I fully agree with this one too, is there's just so many people in the sports betting world that it will get people into watching disc golf just because it's another thing to bet on, especially when disc golf happens. There's not a lot of sports going on. So people are just looking for stuff, you know, throughout the summer. You have the NBA finals, and pretty much it's just baseball we're competing with for that middle stretch before football kicks back up.
There is a little stretch there.
You have like golf,
from like
tennis,
end of
baseball.
June until football starts up in August, and you're just basically fighting against baseball, the dog days of summer, if you will. But
so I think, because that's what he was saying.
I didn't think about that. That's a good thought.
As it gets listed, you know, that's going to be a growth avenue for the sport as well, not just monetarily, but also just interest in watching disc golf. Because I've thrown a few dollars at a Super Bowl before when I do not care, but all of a sudden you care. You put $5 on the Chiefs, and you're just sitting there on the edge of your seat because you're like, if they win, I get $5.05.
That's going to be the very interesting thing to watch next year, because when they announced that, I thought it sounded really ambitious, and I was kind of like, okay, maybe we'll see that in the next 5 years. I'm really surprised to hear that he threw out something as much as like we're hoping to have it listed some places in some states next year.
Yeah, he said they're working towards next year.
Like that's honestly insane. Oh, man, it better be in Virginia. Come on, Jeff, come through. But that to me seems really accelerated for a tour that took like almost the entire year to have a live scoring system set up.
Yeah, but maybe part of the reason of that is they wanted to have the back end so solidified that it could be used. I don't know.
Pro Tour stand.
the final thing is, from the beginning, I've said the Pro Tour seems to move slowly but intentionally.
They do. They do.
And there's been some things that have made me waver from that, but for the most part, when they make a move, it sometimes is like, I don't understand why this is taking so long, and then it like comes to fruition and seems to make sense.
Yeah.
Maybe this is one of them. I don't know.
Be interesting.
The other thing that he said that was kind of refreshing in the current disc golf climate was the guy was asking about the growth of disc golf, and he talked about the boom, obviously, and he's like, and then he slowed down and stalled, and he said, and now we're seeing, just like we were pre-COVID, that like 15 to 20% year-over-year growth rate. He's like, we're just back to normal.
Let's say people forget that disc golf, regardless of a boom, was still a steadily growing sport, and will continue to be because of it. As long as people are trying, the courses are still going to go in more and more. There are still going to be new players because it's so accessible. Disc golf is set up to succeed in a lot of ways, and I think that some people we're not going to be on NBC in prime time in 10 years, but the sport is going to continue to grow.
He called it, Jeff referred, I think he called it the golf of the next generation. That's how he sold disc golf to the guy.
But that's a bit ambitious, but
you got to dream big.
Yeah,
you got to dream big.
Listen, he's the commissioner. You gotta talk that way.
But no, I think as fans we can hear the the like House of Disc and Dynamic Disc layoff and so on and so forth. And you can even see like tournaments not being as full as they were a few years ago. And people just think disc golf's dying or disc golf's going to die. Disc golf would take pretty much, in my opinion, probably twice as long as the history of the sport for it to actually die.
Yeah, no,
like because
there's just so many courses.
It's so rooted now at this point where like think of what disc golf actually dying would mean. Like manufacturers
would just
have to go
stop playing.
out of business.
Yeah.
Like everything would have to stop. Courses would have to be ripped out of the ground. Like that doesn't make logical sense.
Yeah, I mean we're still in sporting goods stores all across the country.
And
like
to hear, because we've felt it this year of, hey, the sport's still growing, and as a media outlet that has a grasp on when people first get into the sport, a lot of times they find foundation. We've had a solid year to where to hear someone else in the sport talk about like, hey guys, the sport's still growing. It just is refreshing because you hear
we're not crazy.
You hear some of the companies that just overbet on themselves.
That's all it is. It's just the dust settling. Yeah.
Got themselves into debt over their head. They are struggling to just get back to, hey, we thought we were going to be operating at X line when we're actually operating at X line, and there's margin between that.
Yeah.
And we have to find a way to close that so we can still survive and thrive. So there will be, as the dust settles, there will be some companies, and we said this in 2020, like a manufacturer is going out of business. We predicted it multiple times because it just people started throwing money around like this was going to last forever, and it just wasn't. So now we're just seeing that happen.
Yeah, it's tough to say where we're at in the time, like because things didn't slow down until it wasn't it still wasn't that far back that things started slowing down as far as like the boom of disc golf once again, and it's hard to tell where we're on in that timeline of like everything finding the new normal. I don't know if it'll be a year from now you'll stop hearing stories about companies going out of business, or if it'll be 3 years from now. But at one point it will, and then it'll probably remain that way until something else and some other crazy event happens.
Yeah.
Like it's just going to take a while for it to find its feet, and it just depends on those companies that did get themselves in trouble by overbetting. How long will it take them to either go out or quit?
Yeah.
Like that's basically what it'll come down to.